Hone in on one of those headline stories now. The alliance of rebel groups in Eastern DRC has declared a humanitarian ceasefire starting today. This follows calls for a safe corridor for aid and hundreds of thousands of displaced people. At least 900 people have been killed in last week's fighting in Goma between rebels and Congolese forces. The Rwanda-backed rebels captured large parts of Eastern DRC's largest city, including its airport. Congolese authorities have said they are open to talks to resolve the conflict, but that such a dialogue must be done within the context of previous peace agreements. Rwanda and the rebels have accused the Congo of defaulting on previous agreements. For more on this humanitarian ceasefire, we're joined now by Claire Waterhouse. She is the head of operational support at Doctors Without Borders Southern Africa. Claire, thanks very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. The World Health Organization telling us that the bodies of 900 people recovered from the streets of Goma just last Friday. I imagine this humanitarian ceasefire comes at a time that is very, very late. It's long awaited for particular organizations like yourselves, aside from the people who are impacted by what's unfolding in the Eastern DRC. But for MSF, how have you been operating, your organization been operating outside of this humanitarian ceasefire?
Hi, thanks for having me to talk about this. Yes, we obviously welcome the ceasefire. We're really happy that there can be some respite for the civilians who've been trapped in this conflict, which has actually been going on for almost 3 years now. So people are completely and utterly exhausted and traumatized, and they've been moving from place to place, fleeing fighting for a long time, much longer than acceptable right now. In terms of our work at MSF, it's been extremely difficult to work under these conditions, and we still are struggling. We've been receiving a mass influx of casualties, and it's very difficult for us to get supplies in at the moment. The humanitarian situation is extremely worrying to us. People are living in really bad conditions, very little shelter, no access to clean water, food and adequate health care, because many health facilities have simply not been able to continue functioning. MSF is continuing to function, but we are struggling to get access to our supplies at the moment.
So that number from the WHO, the bodies of 900 people found in Goma, you talk about this fighting going on for the past 3 years at least. Does MSF have an idea of the number of people who have been killed over that period?
We don't have an idea of ourselves, but what we are hearing is the same numbers as you, 900 bodies so far recovered, but probably many more to come. We know that local authorities are calling the death toll of just the last few weeks of fighting at around 2,600 at the moment. It's really difficult to know at the moment, though, because there is such chaos and their fighting is very widespread. So it's difficult for us to know, but there certainly has been a very high civilian toll. We ourselves have lost a staff member last week who was killed by a gunshot wound near his home. Another one was injured. And these are quite simply violations of international humanitarian law and the rules of war. There should not be any attacking of civilians or health facilities, and we've seen both of those things happening.
People still, though, going to that country and to many other regions around the world where their help is needed at great risk to themselves.
Yeah, we are sending in as many teams as we're able to at this time. We need to scale up our work, not scale down in situations like this. So we did have to temporarily scale down when things were really intense and unpredictable. We at the moment, especially with the news of the ceasefire, are figuring out how we can send in more people to be able to support the population as much as possible. And of course, the vast majority of people who work with us are our colleagues from the DRC themselves, who are incredibly brave to put themselves in harm's way to support their fellow civilians.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to us, Claire, about the kinds of injuries broadly that MSF and other organizations are treating.
So we are seeing a lot of war wounded, a lot of people injured by gunshot wounds and shrapnel. We are seeing a lot of that. Of course, we are also seeing then your normal kinds of day-to-day injuries that happen just in normal life, as well as chronic conditions, women giving birth, people with high blood pressure or diabetes and that kind of thing. And previously, our work in that area of the DRC had focused on malnourished children, mainly from displaced people camps around Goma as a result of the fighting. Obviously, we're still trying to continue that work, but we have had to divert most of our resources into the trauma wounds that we are seeing from the conflict that has spread so rapidly.
Are there any particular treatments? Is there any particular kind of help being given to women and children in Goma?
Yes, well, everything that we do is we focus very particularly on vulnerable populations, as which women and children are a part of that, but of course, to anyone who needs our help. But of course, we are trying to really very much ensure that the routine care that women and children could and should get is still continue to be provided, as well as extra protection in these kinds of very unpredictable times. We've got to focus also on clean water, trying to prevent things like cholera from spreading. We've seen a few cases of cholera reported already, which is extremely worrying to us. We're working in close collaboration with the National Red Cross of the DRC, who are there chlorinating water, and we are doing our best to support them, as well as the International Red Cross that's there.
Yeah, we often talk about I want to get to the issue of water and electricity in a moment, Claire, but we often talk about the physical devastation of a war of this nature. But there is also the issue of a trauma toll, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. And so mental health never falls far from what we try to support with. The people, as I said, are absolutely exhausted and traumatized by the last 3 years, let alone the last 3 weeks. And we are seeing really a high degree of emotional trauma, mental health difficulties as a result of it, especially in children and in women. It's been a really difficult time. So we do always try to provide psychosocial support alongside our actual physical health care. Of course, resources are limited, and it's a sensitive topic. So we are doing that as much as we possibly can with sensitivity that it needs.
Yeah. You talked to us earlier about water supply. There have been reports of intermittent water supply, electricity outages as well. I know that the humanitarian ceasefire sort of came into effect just today, but what are those conditions now insofar as water and electricity are concerned?
So we are monitoring the situation as of now to understand what the ceasefire has changed. At this stage, just still monitoring to get that latest information and hopefully hear what's happening. But probably over the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been extremely limited water supply. Like I said, people are not able to access drinking water in adequate amounts and are taking, watering cans to Lake Kivu to get their water, which is really not adequate for drinking and makes us very concerned about waterborne diseases like cholera, but also just diarrheal diseases, which in children can be extremely serious, especially if they're not getting adequate nutrition as well. And then, of course, electricity. I think there was no electricity for a full week, which really led to basically a blackout of information and made the situation just a lot more dangerous for civilians because there were no lights. There was no way to see what was going on once the sun set, which is, I think, was terrifying for everyone involved. There does seem to be some improvement in the situation now, but everything is a bit sporadic.
Do you know at this stage, Claire, how long this humanitarian ceasefire will be in place for? What's been communicated to MSF?
We don't know at this stage. We know that it's a unilateral ceasefire, so it was declared by the rebel alliance, but we do hope that all parties to the conflict will respect the ceasefire. We have been saying that a space for humanitarian work is really important, whether that be a humanitarian corridor or a ceasefire like this for humanitarian reasons. So we really hope that it will be respected and adhered to so that we can make some headway in working with those who've been affected by the conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire Waterhouse, let me thank you for your time.